Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's App Marketing Masterclass webinar, where we'll talk about how to increase sales and build brand loyalty with your app. I'm Trisha Carr, and I'll be your moderator. I am very excited to have Eduardo Ronquillo Jr., Technical Senior Account Manager at Adjust, and Lucy Rogers, Senior Director of Global Partnerships at Criteo, as our presenters today. Before we move on to today's agenda, just a few housekeeping items. On the GoToWebinar panel to your right, you'll see an area where you can ask questions. Feel free to submit any questions you have as we go through the presentation, and we'll get to some of them at the end if we have extra time. And if at any point you'd like to access the full presentation, you can download all of the slides you'll see today and also in the handout section on the panel to your right. And for today's agenda, we're going to talk about how to get the most value from your app, whether your goal is to drive purchases or increase engagement. So first, we'll look at some global data from Criteo and Adjust that shows the state of mobile apps around the world. Second, we'll look at more data that shows who is the 2020 app user. Next, we'll explain the difference between commerce apps and loyalty apps and talk about the user journey on each type of app. And then last, we'll give you some tips for how to reach your specific app goal, depending on if you have a commerce-driven app or a loyalty-driven app. Before we get into the content, Lucy, Eduardo, I would love to have you both introduce yourselves and tell us how Criteo and Adjust partner to help our clients.
Great, thanks Trisha. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. I'm really excited to be here with Eduardo to share some of our mobile marketing insights with everyone. As Trisha mentioned, I am the Senior Director of Global Partnerships at Criteo, and so that means I'm responsible for sourcing, onboarding, and ultimately growing and scaling the global partnerships for the company. I have been at Criteo for about just over 3 years, and it's been really exciting for me to see our partnership grow with Adjust beyond just mobile attribution and, seeing it grow to all aspects of the business.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eduardo. So I'm one of the technical senior account managers here at Adjust, based out of the SF office. Just over 3 years now at Adjust, so it's been quite an amazing ride, seeing the growth and being able to work with a ton of our different partners, and of course, including Criteo. I manage enterprise clients primarily on the West Coast, many who also work with Criteo on a daily basis. So excited to be here and share some great insight and hopefully a lot of great takeaways for you guys tuning in today.
Awesome, thank you both. So Eduardo, I will have you officially kick off the webinar for us.
Awesome, thanks Trisha. So as you mentioned, in this first section, we'll take a look at the landscape and see where we're at with app installs and engagement globally. So first, let's start off with this pretty cool stat. Mobile subscriptions outgrew the global population in 2018. So while there were 7.7 billion people in the world, there were actually about 7.9 billion mobile connections. And everyone listening to this presentation right now is probably here because you've either invested a lot to build a mobile app experience or you're interested in getting started. And everyone here knows how powerful mobile is for reaching consumers. So to get an idea of app use around the world, let's take a quick look at this growth map. So this map shows the growth of app installs in quite a few countries around the world. And to calculate each country's growth score, we took the number of installs per month and divided them by MAU, or monthly active users, for each country in our data set. So the more users that install in relation to the MAU, the higher the score. This essential metric reveals the rate of growth that apps gain from installs versus their monthly active user base. The countries in blue saw the most app installs in 2018, most notably Vietnam, Thailand, and Brazil. Countries in yellow, like the UK, Canada, Germany, and Japan, have growth rates below the global average of 30.9. So for example, Japan's growth rate was one of the lowest we saw at 19.4. These markets are maturing a bit, but installs are, of course, still on the rise. Now, this next map will show how app growth scores around the world. Once again, we calculate each country's growth score by taking the number of installs per month and dividing them by MAU for each country in our data set. Some of the top countries where we see the most overall growth are Indonesia, Brazil, Korea, Malaysia, and China. So overall, this is telling us that new apps aren't being drowned out by the dominant figures in the app industry. Verticals are growing at different rates, but collectively, app installs are still growing globally. So what we also did now is take a look at growth scores from the vertical level. And based on what we were seeing in 2018, the fastest growing app categories were mid-core gaming apps, ride-hail apps, sports gaming apps, video and streaming, and dating apps. So some of these would look like Brawl Stars, Bird or Lime, Hulu, Tinder, and Bumble. Some of these gaming apps continue to grow as the leading app category, but what's interesting is entertainment apps are taking a significant share of in-app time. Now, on the other hand, the app categories with the slowest growth in 2018 were comics, music, banking, social network apps, and news apps, such as Spotify, Chase B of A, Facebook, Bleacher Report, apps of these nature. So there are quite a few different variables for slower growth, but sometimes we do see this when some of these apps have already saturated the market. Awesome. Now, Lucy, I'll let you take it from here.
Great. Thanks, Eduardo. I'm excited to share some of Criteo's stats as well. So looking at this next slide here, Criteo has a global commerce review study that we put out in 2018, where we basically looked at the browsing and purchasing data for over 5,000 retailers across 80 different countries. And really what we found overall is that for retailers who were investing in any type of app advertising, the number of in-app transactions significantly increased. So as you can see here in this chart, we had an 18% increase in the Americas, 26% in EMEA, and then the highest increase in APAC at 46%. We also saw globally an average of about a 30% increase in in-app transactions, which is about 1/3 year-over-year growth, which is really, really significant. This is, again, stats and study from 2018. We actually are in the process of publishing the 2019 numbers, and as you can imagine, it will look probably even higher than these 2018 numbers, and that will be hot off the press in the next few weeks, so be on the lookout for that. Moving on, getting a little bit more granular into this study, let's focus on the data for the Americas specifically. So this same commerce report also found that conversion rates on shopping apps were 3 times higher than that of mobile web in these particular regions. So it really shows the importance for marketers to be investing in app advertising, specifically for the retail vertical. Also for this webinar, we looked at some of the recent data across the Criteo network. And so this chart here shows purchase data for in-app versus web. And as you can see, there's a common theme across many verticals, sort of what we had touched on in the last slide as well. So you can see here, for example, that the average shopper will make 56% more purchases in-app than on web. And when we get a little bit more granular and look specifically at classifieds, the average user in-app has about 86% more leads than on web. And looking at the traveling side of things, travelers are 26% more likely to book in-app than on web. And I know from personal experience, I definitely, utilize travel apps that way. So it makes perfect sense to see these numbers that way. So now that we've covered some of the global app usage, let's shift gears a little bit and look at, who is the 2020 app user? So in this section, I'll take you through some of the typical behaviors of the app user today. Here's another scary stat for you. Again, looking at the Criteo network numbers across 15 highly active countries around the world, we found that 49% of app users abandon their app just after 1 day, 24 hours after downloading, which is crazy. If you think about that, especially from a marketer's perspective, you know, when you're monitoring the number of installs you get from an app install campaign, are you really taking into account the number of users who are abandoning after 1 day? And that's critical that we do that.
Totally, 100%. Totally agree with you, Lucy. So we also have some adjust data that really shows the app retention and how this falls dramatically after day one. So if we take a look at quarterly adjust data, which spans about 4 billion installs and 7,000 apps. If we're looking at Q3 of 2018 worldwide, we're seeing retention at about 21% on day one, 8.7% on day 7, and 6.6% by day 28. Now, if we look a year later at Q3 of 2019 worldwide, we see a slight dip in retention at 20.3% day one, very slight increase to 10.4% on day 7 versus the 8.7 the year prior, and then another smaller drop on day 28. So from 2018 6.6 to 2019 5.8. So the main takeaway here that I'd like everyone to have is it's really difficult to keep a user engaged long term. Now on this next slide that we'll take a look at, these charts right here show the app retention rates across 5 regions for 4 different app verticals. As you can see, most users drop off within the first week. And these charts specifically confirm a few important things for app marketers. To be expected, e-commerce apps retain the most users in mobile-first regions like APAC and South America. Gaming apps are top performers across regions, and entertainment apps have long-term retention challenges.
Very interesting, Eduardo, to see some of the similar trends. I'm going to talk through some more data on the next slide here. So this chart shows the frequency of the app session across the 15 countries that we had talked about prior. And it's clear to see the immediate downward trend, you know, which means app users are really opening and only using the app a handful of times after that first app session. So the top bar shows 35.5% of app users. That's, you know, about 1/3 of app users who are abandoning it once after download. So key takeaway here is really for marketers to have a good first experience for the user within the app when they open it. Otherwise, they will become distracted, they'll move on to other apps, and you'll really lose their attention. So we'll get into some of the strategies around this, but something like a deep linking experience is exactly something that, you know, will keep the user there looking and finding what they were in search of when they downloaded the app. So now let's move on and take a look at the average time within the app broken down by vertical. These stats were also pulled directly from the Criteo network. So across all app verticals, we found that the average time spent within an app is about 5 minutes and 38 seconds. The longest time per vertical or sessions for verticals such as culture, media, and leisure. These verticals had users spending up to about 8 minutes per session when consuming the content. A lot of the shopping verticals fall right around the average time of the 5 minutes. But when we got even more granular into shopping, we found that fashion and luxury apps, as well as mass merchant apps, were over 6 minutes. So those types of apps, you know, users were spending more time browsing there. The app vertical with the lowest time per session is banking and finance, and that was significantly lower at around an average of 2.5 minutes per session. If you think about that, it actually kind of makes sense though, right? Someone who is in a banking app is probably just checking their balance, depositing a check, or looking for a local ATM, so they're not spending a significant amount of time within that app. We also found that the average number of events per app session was around an average of 4.5 across all verticals. So just to be clear, I want to make sure we are all on the same page about the term event. We define events as any sort of action, right? So that would be a login, a page download, a registration, a purchase, any sort of action that the user is taking once they are within the app. So categories with the highest number of events per session include classify, fashion, luxury, price comparing apps, real estate, and even mass merchants. And some of the categories with the lowest events include culture, media, leisure, health and beauty, banking, and finance. So our app data really tells us two stories, right? It tells us that it's very hard to retain a user past the first app open, but once you do get them hooked, they are engaged within the app. So in this section, we're going to help you build an engagement and retention strategy for your app as a marketer. So to help you narrow down what steps you'll need to take, we're going to be putting the app together into two different buckets here. We're going to have the commerce apps and the loyalty apps. So what's the difference between these two? First, at a high level, commerce apps exist primarily to drive the users to make a purchase. Now, of course, you can argue that a retailer's app, for example, might have some engaging features. Let's say you can virtually try on makeup, or you can see a picture of furniture within a room to see how it looks. But when you think about, what is the ultimate goal of that? It's really to get the user to transact on some specific item. So here are some examples of what we're calling commerce apps. The obvious ones, Walmart, Macy's, Wish, eBay, etc. But there are also travel apps in here, Booking.com, or delivery apps like Postmates, and photo sharing apps like Shutterfly. So the business model and the common theme for all these apps is that they're moving the user down the purchase funnel and hopefully, fingers crossed, getting them to convert and purchase within the app. Eduardo, do you want to take us through the loyalty app?
Yeah, sure thing. So as you mentioned, there's no app strategy that's one size fits all. Really depends on each app's business model. So the high-level business model for loyalty apps is getting consumers to actively engage with your brand and pick them over any other vertical. So for example, think about Spotify. Spotify wants to be the only app you want to use for streaming music. And lucky for them, Statista reported that Spotify users spend over 32 hours per week listening to music in Q2. And most of that was likely done within the app. So another great example of a loyalty app is Headspace. If you're committed to some type of plan, you'll likely be using their meditation app versus any other similar service. Now, Lucy, would you like to walk us through the commerce app user journey?
Sure, yeah. So shifting back to commerce, the long-term goal for any commerce-driven app is really to turn the user into a frequent buyer. And so for Criteo data, we talked earlier, the Criteo data we talked about earlier shows you how the users convert and spend more time in app through various verticals. So first, I'm going to take you through the commerce journey here. For every app marketer knows, you really need to get the consumer to discover your app, consider it, and then take it past the download. But the very first stage of it is the actual download of the app. So once you have the app downloaded, what do the users tend to do? So we at Criteo looked at 2 billion app users with 49 of our partners, and we found that at any moment, 40% of the users were at the top of the purchase funnel, meaning that they were browsing, but they hadn't yet gotten to any product level within the app. And then moving down that purchase funnel, 38% of the app users went through to the product level, meaning they were actively viewing various products within the app, and they were more engaged than just, say, looking at the homepage within the app. And then from there, we see a drop off, and about 15% of app users have actually added something to their cart. And then lastly, we have what's considered, cart abandonment. We have only 7% of the users are actually buying within the app of the 15% that added to their cart. So the question then becomes, how do you get more people to go through this purchase funnel, buy from you, keep you coming back to your app and shopping and being a loyal customer? So we'll walk you through some tips in the last section of the webinar. But first, I want to pass it over to Eduardo to talk a little bit about the loyalty app user journey.
For sure. Thanks, Lucy. So like we mentioned, any app that we're grouping into the loyalty category isn't about frequent buying, but rather for loyalty, it's about frequent use. So you want your users to continuously engage with your brand, and you want your app to be one of your users' top apps in their arsenal. So just like commerce apps, there's a funnel of engagement and a cycle that loyalty apps want their users to continually go through. But first, you need to get the user past just the install. So just as we covered in the previous slides, many of these apps lose a big portion of their users in the first few days of use. So let's take a look at calorie trackers, for example. So apps that track a user's caloric intake. These apps have a robust day one retention, but they drop off pretty steeply, retaining less than 10% of users by day 14. Fitness trackers maintain poor retention throughout the cycle, with about less than 20% of users returning after day one. And that 80% figure may even seem high, as only 7% of users on average return to health tracker apps by day 30. Now, gaming, for example, is another vertical that experiences heavy losses, and they shift about 73% of their user base by day 30. It's quite a bit of turnover when you consider the work marketers are putting in to acquire these users. Sleep tracking apps, for example, are actually an app that users can and really do rely on frequently. So these tend to have the best retention rates of all the apps that we've examined thus far. However, entertainment retains the best. So these keep the users engaged for the long run. If we draw on data from the top 1,000 most active apps, which will include the highest number of sessions per week and on a Just platform, within the first 6 months of 2019, entertainment apps see the highest rates. So this is driven by the massive uptake in music and video streaming platforms, which number as some of the most addictive forms of entertainment. And I think I could personally attest to that as well. So when entertainment apps keep users coming back from day 1 to day 30 after install, we're seeing entertainment app retention rates drop from about 36% to 18%. In comparison, educational apps retain 30% of users on day 1, but only have 8% by day 30.
Awesome. Thank you, Eduardo, and thanks, Lucy. This has been great so far. Definitely a lot of data to digest, and definitely laying out that big challenge that once you get that install, you really have to work hard for that long-term engagement and to eventually have a frequent app buyer or a frequent app user. So like Lucy mentioned in this next section, we're going to give you tips to create your strategy to get more value from your app. So Lucy, first I will pass it off to you to talk about how to increase sales with your commerce app.
Great, thanks, Trisha. Yeah, so at Criteo, we really encourage our clients to do 2 things. First, focus on quality, not quantity, of the installs, and also, secondly, to go beyond just the install. And I'm sure Eduardo would agree, that we want to help our clients get the most value they can from their app, no matter whether it's commerce or loyalty. And that's because they're investing so heavily in their marketing strategy, we want to make sure that they're getting the best out of that. So when we talk specifically and work with commerce app marketers, we walk them through 3 core capabilities of our mobile platform at Criteo. First, app install, app engagement, and ultimately retargeting. So let's get focused on each of these. First, when you're doing an app install campaign, you obviously want to turn the best customers into your app users. So that means that you really want to bring the most active mobile web shoppers into your app so that they're more immersed in the shopping experience. We can help you create an app install campaign targeted at new audiences who will become your best app customers. We have at Criteo what's called the Criteo Shopper Graph, which is our unique commerce data set, which collects in real time over 2 billion mobile app IDs across all different devices. And our proprietary technology is able to look at the browsing and behavioral data to identify, who is the best prospect for your particular app. And so that includes things from, who are the active web shoppers on mobile and on desktop. And we look at consumers who are looking at, maybe similar products to yours, or frequent apps that are very similar to yours. And we'd use that data to be able to target specifically. Secondly, as I mentioned before, go beyond the install campaigns and really re-engage the users with something of value to them. So we focus on 3 main areas of re-engagement at Criteo. First being engage those brand new users with personalized ads designed to drive in-app engagement. Touched on this a little bit before, but the classic example of that would be the deep linking. User sees an ad for an app install, they click it, and they get in there and they're seeing the product that they want to see. Have that great experience. Second type of re-engagement is winning back the users who maybe uninstalled the app one day or a week later. Whenever they uninstall, re-engage them with ads that are promoting new features or products, special offers, coupons, incentives, whatever that might be. And then third and finally, the type of re-engagement where we're reminding lapsed or dormant users about what they're missing out on having downloaded that app. And again, promoting special products, features, offers, but some way to bring those dormant users back in to the app. And then the third step of this is increasing your sales within the app. You want to retarget the users based on the previous shopping behavior to get them to drive down that funnel and purchase. So you want to show them ads with product recommendations based on all the products for their browsing and purchasing history in the open internet, not just within the app, but across every device and channel. So Criteo's technology uses a powerful AI to recommend the right product to the right user at the right time, and to engage them with ads that are directly deep link the consumers to the product or offer within your app. So let's get a real life example here of a Criteo client who took advantage of our in-app inventory to re-engage their app users and keep them, hooked within the app. So for those of you that don't know, Brands for Friends is a private online shopping club that was already working with Criteo on the display side for web when they decided, hey, we really need to add some in-app marketing to the mix. And they were looking to get into that. So they worked with us. We set up the measurement with Adjust, and they immediately launched the campaign and saw the numbers increase. And here is the data to show it. So Criteo's personalized in-app ads deep linked every shopper to the most relevant product pages and drove 3 times the increase in products browsed per user. We saw a 7% increase in the in-app revenue share and a 10% increase in the active app users. So as you can see, it was really, really a successful campaign and sort of bringing this all to life. So now I'm going to pass it over to Eduardo.
Awesome. Thanks, Lucy. So as we've seen in numerous benchmark reports, the highest amount of users leave between day 0 and day 1. As such, it's the biggest chance you have to keep your users. So to improve long-tail retention, you need to focus on first impressions. As Andreessen Horowitz partner and investor Andrew Chen wrote, the best way to bend the retention curve is to target the first few days of usage, and in particular, the first few. So to do that, first, you have to create a great onboarding experience for your app. Make sure that your experience is incredible from the first interaction new users have with your app, and anything less than that has the likelihood for churning. You can also drive initial user investment by automatically populating suggested contacts, for example, or by pushing users to fulfill a simple activity. These steps help create early engagement, so help walk them through the process and get them familiar with the app. From there, your app needs to be habit-forming without being too annoying about it. This is a real challenge, especially for education apps, who often gain users that are on a sudden self-kick improvement, but who may quickly go back to old ways of behaving. So focusing on the onboarding experience also gives you the chance to identify any bottlenecks and to help create a seamless user experience. So in almost every app experience, users can find some level of frustration. Finding those moments where users leave and never return can help your onboarding and later optimize your user experience. So whether it's speed improvement, imbalances in difficulty, or even spelling mistakes, which could lead to letting you down, it's important to find those pain points and remove them. So if a large amount of users seem to be churning at the same point, your data analysis can reveal key areas for improvement within your app. Second, segment your app users, and give them personalized experiences. It's not enough to follow a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to retention. So from location to user preferences, there are plenty of ways to craft unique experiences for different users to keep their attention on you. Segmenting your users can really help with this and also make retargeting much more effective. And third, you want to be able to A/B test your features to learn user preferences. A/B testing is the only surefire way that you can know that you're trying the best route in what you'd like to achieve. So whether big or small, testing your latest features on different segments can work wonders in finding out how successful you might be without alienating your audience or lowering your attention by releasing a new creation to the world. So similar, let's take a look at how Strava optimized their long user conversion cycles. So Strava, for a little backstory, is passionate about building the world's most engaged community of athletes. And we've highlighted earlier how there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach for measuring performance, but with Strava, their unique challenge is to attribute real lifetime value to their subscription-based service. And more specifically, their exercise app doesn't follow a conventional way of monetizing users, so there's no traditional app conversion flow. They don't really just want to install. They want to make sure they find the right user to monetize and keep coming back to their app. And because a key portion of their app has a social component, Strava learned that their best focus should be engagement over acquisition. So by creating customized KPIs specific to their user base and understanding which types of users were monetizing from which networks, they were able to increase engagements from the users and saw improved subscription results. So definitely make sure that you're customizing your KPIs to what fits best for your app, and from there you can definitely start changing your path and start analyzing, and from there increase engagements.
Awesome. Thanks, Eduardo, again. Thanks, Lucy, again. That was awesome. I hope everyone here learned something. I know that a lot of the apps I use, for example, I definitely don't feel like I'm getting a personalized experience. So I think there's definitely room for improvement out there. It looks like we have a few minutes. We did get a question or two about specific app verticals. And again, going a little bit more granular than commerce versus loyalty. So I think it would be cool for both of you to talk about the apps that you're personally a fan of, the apps out there that you think have great strategies that get you to buy, that get you to keep coming back. Lucy, I guess, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So there's obviously, I use quite a few apps, and I'm a big fan of Instagram and a few of the big ones. But when you think about, there's two that stand out in my mind in terms of what we talked about today. On the loyalty side, I love Strava, which is interesting that that's the example and case study that Eduardo gave. It's really fun for me to track my runs, see what trails people are hiking, those kinds of things. And be able to look back and see, last week I ran a certain amount of miles, and this week I've increased to this many. So definitely one of my favorite loyalty apps for sure. And then on the commerce side, I really, really enjoy the Sephora app. I think their user engagement strategy there is great, from loyalty points all the way down to previous orders. They do a great job with their push notifications, getting me back into the app, seeing what's new in there, and even being able to try different shades of makeup and really explore and browse other products. I think they do a fantastic job on the commerce side.
Awesome. And for me, I would say, so I'm a huge music head. I love to geek out on music. So I think I have two examples for loyalty apps when it comes to music. So the first one is Spotify. Pretty simple, and I'm sure that everyone uses this. But what I really love about Spotify and what keeps me coming back is finding new music and being alerted when new albums are dropped. So I can follow a ton of different artists, and I can have a customized feed almost where I can see what's coming out, new drops on Fridays. So it always keeps me coming back. On top of all the customized stuff I can do, playlists and all that stuff. So it really helps me find new music. The other music app that I'm actually quite loyal to as well is SoundCloud. So when it comes to finding new music that aren't from mainstream artists, so a lot of indie artists that I love to follow, such as like artists from Selection, for example, a lot of different independent DJs and independent producers from both the US and around the world. It makes it really easy for me to find music that I've already liked and find similar artists. So when it comes to geeking out on music, I'm extremely loyal to the apps that I use, and those are primarily Spotify and SoundCloud.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to say I'm definitely a fan of Spotify as well. Probably a lot of our attendees are too. They definitely do a great job of alerting you to the most valuable things while not just, spamming you with a bunch of notifications. And, it's like they're not coming off as desperate. They really genuinely want to connect with their audience. So that's great. Well, thank you both again for today. We, again, definitely learned a lot of data. Thank you to all of our attendees as well. Yeah, hope you enjoy your day, and we'll see you next time.